ready.
Okay. Robin, ready? I'm going to call to order a regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen today, January 21st, 2020, 6:30 p.m. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is approval of minutes.
Which should take us the rest of our meeting.
Kick back and relax, because there's just a couple. So I will make a motion to approve the minutes of our January 6th, 2020, 5:30 special meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll move to approve our January 6th, 2020, 6:30 regular meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve our January 13th, 2020 special meeting at 5:30.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Me? All right.
I can do it.
Go for
you just
it.
usually do,
No,
so it's
go
just kind of relaxing. I'll make a motion to approve the January 13th, 6:30 special meeting.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Robin, thank you for spending a couple weeks doing minutes. All right. The next item is present to speak. If you are present to speak on anything, this is now the opportunity for you to do so. We just ask you to identify yourself for the record.
Go ahead.
I saw this hand first, so sorry.
Go ahead. Peter Oltinchich, 97 Trask Road. I'm pleased to see that the item 7 agenda is there. Thank you. And I'm just wondering if I could reserve time to speak at that time, or if you could reverse A and B. I'm just concerned that the call be as expansive as possible to that town meeting, so there's ample discussion and we're not limited by a call that restricts discussion of the topic. You understand what I'm saying? I think that's important because we all went to that first meeting and it was suspended because of the fire department rules. So I think there are a lot of questions, I have a lot of questions about the process and what's going on. And if that call can accommodate that, I think that would be best for all. Thank you.
Peter?
Peter Tanaka, 125 Mason Road. I can't find my agenda right now, but I believe that there was something, public comment at Selectmen's Meeting number 7B. I think that it's very important for the public to be involved for two reasons. One is that's the way decisions are best made when alternative paradigms and facts that may not already have been entered into the discussion are brought into the discussion. It's very important from a democracy point of view that the public be able to express itself, because as we saw with the land use, that was considered our time to input. I mean, that was our only time to consider the input was during the selectmen's meeting. There was no public meeting, there was no informational meeting. It was the selectmen's meeting and then the town meeting. So I think it's very important from that point. I also think it's important from a far broader philosophical point that this is a democracy and that we are citizens and not subjects of this board. So we should have our input at the time that when the decisions are made, and that the town in Willington's town structure, the town is the legislative body of this town, the board being the executive branch. And I think that if the legislative and executive branch can't communicate, I think that's a major downfall in the process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else present to speak? Okay. Correspondence, you'll see a list of correspondence. Of note is that the new hazard mitigation plan that we approved through Prague has come into our office, so there's a copy in the selectmen's office as well. And we also received some posters regarding the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage from the Secretary of State. They were beautiful posters. They were rather large posters. We've shared some of them with the schools so that they could be utilized for education purposes as well. So I thank them for that, and Mr. Stevens for finding a use for them so that they didn't go unnoticed in the town hall where they might not be noticed by individuals. All right, so status report. I noted at our meeting on the 6th that we had made an offer for a new assistant land use agent. I'm happy to say that Ashley Stevens began with us last Monday the 13th. She is our new assistant zoning agent. And so if you find yourself in the land use department, stop by and say hello to Ashley, and we look forward to her hopefully long tenure with us. No relation. It's not even spelled the same. Okay, so Public Works. Troy is with us this evening.
All right, roadside mowing is still going on. We've patched holes around town. Tree trimming on Mason Road. I did have a call from the commission there today that said we did a little bit too much trimming on that road.
What commission?
The Conservation Commission.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to kind of back it down a little bit on that.
See a head nod from a resident of Mason Road.
I think we need a little bit more.
Well, maybe you can talk to her, Pete, because she wasn't too happy with me. And then we also had a tree company come in and take some trees down on Daleville Road, Kohler Road, Lucian, and Liska. We've been cleaning the shop, we've been washing the trucks, getting the trucks ready for the storm. We had the privilege of hauling some millings from the state. We didn't get any when they did 32, but Steve was nice enough to give us some, so we had 2 trucks hauling the other day for that. We've replaced a couple cutting edges on the trucks and the loader, and we picked up trash at River Road Park and some tires on Fenton Ruby Park there that someone dropped off.
I did ask Troy to give us an update on his snow budget. So it looks like we've had 16 storms that required some combination, either just sanding or plowing and sanding. So we had 16 of them. He's used up a considerable amount of that budget. Mainly, you want to talk about the difference between the sand and salt we've used last year as opposed to this year?
Last year it was a 1-to-1 mix. This year we used 2 salt to 1 sand. It seemed to work a lot better. I have had a lot of people not complain, have compliments on the roads being in better shape. But we did hit the salt budget pretty hard with that being said.
So with the potential of a 2+ day storm coming this weekend, we're certainly keeping an eye on those numbers, but I know residents have reached out to my office as well, commenting on the level of plowing. Our plowing is not any different. Our crew is doing the same thing. It's the product that they're using on the road. It's making a difference, and I think it's making a difference, especially those storms that were during the day, affect busing significantly. And you know, some people who had some concerns about the plowing on their roads last year have been happier with what Troy is doing. And I'm not sure, Troy, when they call you, if you talk to them about what it is that you're doing different.
A little, yes, I've had, yeah. Yep.
So he is, well, the bottom line is not overspending. He has certainly overspent the salt budget considerably, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that, and Troy believes that he so far can stay within his Public Works Department budget and maintain that 2-to-1 salt. So we saw last week in some of our budget discussions an increase in costs over what we budgeted for this year to account for some of that. So.
And the state's also mandating that we use more salt, almost go to pure salt with DEP. So it's eventually one of those things, it's going to happen, because DEP's considering the road sweepings hazardous. That needs to be hauled off-site. So there is a cost. So we either use salt or we haul the material off-site. That's,
And it looks like, by the numbers that you've shared with me, it looks like the number of times the crew has had to go back out to sand,
is way down.
you know, the next day is down because the material you put down actively, because we had a lot of ice, more than snow in the December storms that we had. So thank you for updating and keeping us posted. I'll share this, I think his email went just to me, I'll make sure I share it with you and Blessington at the same time. All right. So item 7, new business, is to call town meeting. I'll make the motion and then we can have discussion from there. So I move to notice the town of Willington, notice and warning, special town meeting. The electors of the town of Willington and all persons who are entitled to vote in town meeting on the matters mentioned in the following warning are hereby warned and notified to meet in town meeting at Hall Memorial School, 111 River Road, Willington, at 7 p.m. on Thursday, January 30th for the following purpose. Item 1, to see if the townspeople, on the recommendation of the Board of Finance, will appropriate $16,900 from the Capital Reserve Fund for the purpose of patching the roofs at Center Elementary School and Hall Memorial School. Item 2, to see if the townspeople, on the recommendation of the Board of Finance, will appropriate $160,252.73 from the general fund balance for the purpose of a new Freightliner 114 SD plow truck for Department of Public Works. Item 3, to see if the townspeople, based on the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, will establish a school building committee for a building project of a pre-K through 8 school. Registered voters attending shall cast a certified paper ballot yes or no vote for this item. Item 4, to see if the townspeople, based on the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, will authorize at least the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications for a building project of a pre-K through 8 school. Registered voters attending shall cast a certified paper ballot, yes or no, vote for this item. Item 5, to see if the townspeople, based on the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, will authorize the superintendent of schools to apply to the commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services to accept or reject a grant for a building project of a pre-K through 8 school. Registered voters attending shall cast a certified paper ballot, yes or no, vote for this item. Dated at Willington this 21st day of January 2020.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So this was an item we removed. We had information from our attorney that in order to form a committee, we did not need the legislative body approval. While that may be true, in order to ever do anything with the project, this has, and have those, and funds spent, and have any of that be eligible for reimbursement through a state grant, these items have to be done. So you heard me talk at this board before about making sure we do it right and not fast, and making sure we have the right questions, that if we were moving forward with a grant, these are the questions that would be needed in order to apply for any grant, for a school construction grant. These questions do not mean that a new school is being built. This means the building committee can be established and they can move forward with their work. If they spend money and there is a project at the end that is reimbursable, they will now be eligible for reimbursement. We worked with Office of School Construction to make sure the questions we were asking were the appropriate questions needed for any potential reimbursements. This could pass or fail at town meeting. If it passes, there's so many other hurdles before any construction was done on any project. And this was specifically a pre-K through 8 school, so that did not mean the town had to only look at a new school on a new site, which may or may not be what comes out of that building committee. It would be to that building committee to make those decisions, not this board. There was a recommendation from the Board of Education to look in that direction. This board unanimously voted to form a committee, but the conversation now has to go to town meeting before we can do any more, and that's where the townspeople get to participate. Peter, to your concern that the question was broad enough, the question about having a school building committee, there's more than ample room to have conversation on that in item 3. And that's where the public absolutely gets a say at town meeting and can have that conversation as to whether or not a school building committee is established.
What time was the meeting called for?
7 p.m.
7
And this meeting is called at Hall School because in the wintertime we typically close the Old Town Hall if there's another overwhelming demand. Interest in this topic, which I always hope that there is, that there should be room.
May I ask a question?
Yes. You're opposed? You're not opposed? Yes, sir.
Thank you. What's troubling to me about the call, and perhaps you can elaborate, is when your board voted to ask for a town meeting to authorize a school building committee, it said school building feasibility committee. And then that got lost somewhere in the process. And I think that should be restored, because that's what you said you were going to do. That's what the John Blessington voted for with the two of you. Now it just says school building committee. That presupposes an outcome to me. As you just said, it could go in any number of directions, so I think the word feasibility is an important element that the townspeople need to see, because we should be objective about the process and not, and that's why I'm wondering, it's almost premature to authorize, have item 4 where you're asking to fund a building plan. What if they elect to modify Hall Center School or do nothing because our enrollment is so low, whatever the case may be? Doesn't seem right to me to presuppose a direction in the manner that it's being portrayed.
So I'll start with, I don't believe we ever used the term feasibility study. I believe a feasibility study was done on the Board of Ed side. They made a recommendation. We authorized a committee with the purpose of building a new or exploring a new pre-K through 8 school on a new site. That may or may not be what comes out of the school building committee. That's to the school building committee to determine, not for this board. There was a recommendation made from the Board of Ed, and so we move forward. So a school building committee could determine there's no land, so we're not looking at a new site. And they could look at it and say, we believe after looking at all of the information that a renovated school is a better option. That's to the school building committee at this point, and they will look at all of those items. None of this says a new school is going to come out of this project. These are the items, if dollars are spent within a school building committee, in order to have those part of a project that is reimbursable, these are the questions that have to go before your legislative body, that have to be asked.
And I would like to add that the questions were generated based on recommendations that were the outcome of many years' worth of feasibility studies, town hall meetings, open forums. So these questions did not come from thin air. They came from many years' worth of town input and open forums and community conversations, many of which happened over the course of the last 1 to 2 years. So they aren't coming from nothing. They were generated by a lot of work by the town and a lot of input by townspeople in that process, including the Board of Education, including, parent-teacher organizations, and I know our superintendent has had many open forums for the public, over 6 over the last year at least, I think.
So the discussions began 6 years ago.
Yeah, so this isn't a new conversation, and this project and this concept has not come from nowhere. It has come from a very deliberate, intentional, lengthy, interactive, collaborative process with the town.
I attended virtually every one of those meetings, so I fully understand that.
Okay, great.
But I'm concerned that you're still contradicting what you said in your own selectmen's meeting minutes, where it said it would be a feasibility committee, not a building committee for a purpose. But I'm assuming that's open for discussion at this meeting. as you're called.
There'll be discussion at the town meeting, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I filed a petition
yes.
with you guys. How is that going to be handled?
You should be receiving a response within the next day or so. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none. The motion on the table was the notice of the town meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, the next item was something we brought up just prior to Selectman Blessington not being with us, which was discussion about public comment at our Selectmen's meeting. I feel important to say two things. One, I would like to have much further discussion when either Selectman Blessington is back or that there is another voice at the table. Two, this is in no way taking away from the public's ability to speak. We have present to speak. This is just helping the public to understand the conversation. The work that's being done here is the work of the board. And the public has a right to give us their comment, and it's just defining the time for that within our meeting. We're not looking at taking away anyone's voice. There has always been a voice, and there will always be a voice as long as I sit at the table. We've discussed a couple of different ways. We could look at instituting some of those, but I think it would be best to keep things the way they are, with present to speak at the beginning of our meeting, and then have further conversation when Selectman Blessington returns to the table, unless you feel differently.
I think we should implement some sort of at least clarify what our current practice is going to be until the time we either adopt something, because even I don't know if we leave things the way that they are, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're leaving present to speak and that's it? Or are we, because we've had a couple of questions today, are we going to leave it up to an as it comes up basis, or what does it mean to leave it as is?
So, to me, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. So that would be a defined time to speak, and then particular items, if the board has called on an individual that has information to share that is pertinent to the topic, they would contribute to the conversation, and they would usually be asked. It is how other meetings work. It is not unusual. We have to do two things. We have to make the meeting available to the public, and we give them an opportunity to speak and share their opinions, which I think is important to local government. And we are doing so. By the open interaction in the middle of a meeting, it can take away from the business that we have and our ability to communicate as a board. So I would like to see that the public interaction is in their ability to share their opinions with us at present to speak. Mm-hmm. We've tossed around some ideas, and maybe we add a present to speak at the end, so you have, and this came up in my time on the Board of Ed. It used to just be the beginning. We added a second present to speak to the end, so that people could give us their feedback, their concerns, their opinions on items that were sometimes off the agenda, but on the agenda. And then after the business we took those concerns into account when we made our decisions, and then they had an opportunity to speak after any votes were taken. Mm-hmm. And so that might be something we could add without John being here, that I don't think would disrupt from the nature or tone of our meetings, and adding that to just before good and welfare.
So the challenge is, though, that we have a way that's written in our officially, according to our agendas, officially, we have a present to speak that's that's item number 3, and according to our agenda, nobody else other than Board of Selectmen should be speaking after that point.
Correct.
That has not been our practice for the 2 years plus that I've been on the board. So when, if we're saying we're not gonna have the conversation right now, we're gonna leave it as is.
As is open discussion.
As is,
right.
Really is open discussion back and forth.
And I think we've done that. We did that tonight. I think we did that last week when people asked to speak. That until we really made, any firm decisions when we were a full board, to some extent, I guess I'm open to that. you know, at any time we could, you know, certainly just move on with the business at hand. The other option is to add some clear information or guidelines under present to speak and what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so in what you shared with me earlier about the sort of common meeting practice, our practice is very different from what is recommended common practice. And I think we have had many meetings in the last year especially that have devolved into sort of chaotic contribution, and it has been counterproductive to our conversation. However, we are not the Senate, right? So where nobody's even allowed on the floor, or you know. So I think we have to strike a balance and honor the tradition of our town to be more casual than you know, the Senate of the United States of America. But on the other hand, we do need to be more efficient in our running of meetings and have the opportunity for selectmen to make decisions, have conversation amongst ourselves, which has oftentimes been interrupted, delayed, and there have been times I've fought for space within a conversation, and I really think that we need to clarify what the expectations are as soon as possible to eliminate and minimize the challenge and potential ill will.
I agree.
Right?
And it can easily go from, we can limit and say, but at what point do you cut it off? And you've now just chosen a random in the middle of conversation policy.
Right, which is why we do that now,
right,
rather than next week when a conversation starts to go bad, say, okay, we're done in 5 minutes.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I think it's important to start qualifying what meeting participation is going to look like more clearly, and sort of establish that. So if we're leaving everything as is, then right now the expectation is after agenda item number 3, nobody in the audience can speak. So
and that would not be atypical of a town council meeting, a board of selectmen meeting, other.
Yep. I know Mansfield runs it much more like this, where they have presence to speak, and then the council does their work, and nobody else is allowed to participate. I think there's an intermediate area for us, but I do think we need more definition and more clarity, you know, and something that's like noticed to everybody.
Absolutely.
And easily available and accessible, and as well as minutes should be easily available and accessible here for, you know, so that it's very present and seen and the expectations are very clear.
So would you, excuse me, then recommend making any changes going forward in the interim?
I would recommend that we, at minimum, put a present to speak at the end as well. And then have a conversation now about whether or not we're comfortable extending conversations. I mean, I don't know. I think at minimum right now I'd recommend putting a present to speak at the end, so at least there can be participation at the beginning of the meeting and then feedback at the end of the meeting.
And I would agree to that, so it's as simple as adding an agenda item, and that the understanding is that the time for the public to speak is during those present to speak times, unless called upon by a member of the board. And every comment should be directed towards the chair, and that we try to follow those rules as best as possible, because what I don't want to do is it start to get out of hand, and then we talk to 4 people, and then we have to cut the others off because we've now gone back and forth for an hour, and now other people want to participate. Our agenda, it's not often we add items to the agenda at a meeting. It can happen, and I like to do that before present to speak, so that someone could speak on an item. It wouldn't often give them time to have done any kind of research if they wanted to offer an opinion. But for the most part, our agenda items are, you know, here so that people can speak to them and speak to their feedback on the information, and that's when they would give us their feedback. It's also important that I'm not at all encouraging a limit of what the conversation could be. If you don't want to speak on a topic on the agenda, but you have something else to share, I think that it's important that people have the opportunity to do so. This is what we're here for, and we're here to listen at any time. So there's no limit in what you can say. We're not suggesting that at all. Just that when the public can speak is what we're talking about, and putting those into very defined boxes. Are you opposed to taking a comment from the floor? Yes.
Just one comment that it may help if you put a time limit on the comments. I agree with you that you can comment about all kinds of stuff, but if somebody's been talking for 15, 20 minutes, that puts pressure on you and everybody else. So maybe, I don't know, 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes max, and that's it. So you have to be concise and get it done, because you're right, you have to get your business done too.
I agree. And I think those things are important. I'll speak to, again, my time before this board was on the Board of Ed, and there is a time limit within their policy, 20 minutes, and each person a limited amount of time. I did find myself in a meeting where this room was packed once, and if everyone got their due time, it was well over the 20 minutes, and the board, recognized that. So I think maybe a time limit per person as opposed to a whole would be better, because we could find ourselves in a controversial topic or things that people really wanted to talk about, and 10 people wanted to talk, and for 2 minutes, it's going to take a little bit longer than meeting where there's only 3 people in the room. So that's important feedback to hear. So moving forward with our next meeting, then you'll see an agenda item of present to speak. We'll put that after old business and before good and welfare.
Yep.
The other thing I will mention is typically, Robin has a template for our meetings, and we put them out, not always thinking about these things. And typically our special meetings that aren't a regular meeting, we've had to move to a different day, don't include present to speak. And I don't believe it's ever trying to take away the present to speak. Today we had someone at our budget workshop. We don't usually have anyone other than those who've been invited. I was happy to see someone at our workshop. So I think as a standard, I'd like to see present to speak on our special meeting agendas as well. If nobody comes, there's no present to speak, that's fine. But I think as a standard, it should be the first item on those, because we cannot add those things to special meetings. And again, I know this came up at our meeting last week, and the intent was never to take away the opportunity to talk, but it's just not something that's on our standard special meeting agenda, but I'd like to make sure that we put that on going forward, so that every meeting we have has an opportunity for public to speak. All right. So old business. I left this on here. Recap of school building committee, next steps. There's really nothing new for this board to discuss until a town meeting has come with some sort of decision. There's no other work for us to do as far as entertaining people who are interested in the committee or appointing. None of that can be done until we actually have a school building committee that's been established by a town meeting. So we'll leave this on the board pending the outcome of, on the agenda pending the outcome of our town meeting on the 30th. All right, good and welfare. I do have some numbers from Troop C. Our numbers for the month of December, we did a total of 413 calls for service. That made 5,545 calls for the year. In December, we had 21 accidents, 20 criminal investigations, and 226 non-reportable matters, and included 6 arrests. For motor vehicle enforcement, there were a total of 153 traffic stops, 2 DUIs, 7 misdemeanor summons, 115 infractions, 10 written warnings, and 23 verbal warnings. I will remind people still to lock your vehicles, I would say at all times, not just at night, and remember not to keep any personal items in your vehicle. Not in Willington, but in other communities, we're still hearing people have gotten into homes and been able to commit robberies by getting into the car, which was their first stop, and being able to use that garage door opener to get into someone's home. So remind our community to safeguard their homes, their vehicles, their families. In December, the schools and the town office building participated in Connecticut Children's Hospital PJ Day for the Kids. So if you came in here on Friday the 13th in December, some of us were in our pajamas. And a total of $604.74 was raised between the town office building, the majority from school, for Connecticut Children's Hospital. And that money has gone, in the last year, 360 schools, 190 businesses have participated since 2011 and raised more than $637,000 for the Center for Cancer and Blood Disorders. So thank you to anyone who participated. Budget season is well underway, as a lot of you in the room are well aware. There are many, many meetings in the upcoming weeks, so check the town website.
Daily.
Pretty much daily. CIP is every Wednesday. Ed has budget workshops and then regular meetings beginning the first Thursday in February. The Board of Finance will meet every Thursday until we set on the budget. And I will mention that I had the opportunity, Troy and I did, to visit with Selectman Blessington on Friday afternoon. He is still in the hospital, and we ask you still to keep him in your prayers, and we hope to see him back with us soon. With that, I would move to adjourn at 7:07.
I just have one question. Under correspondence, you said you had received the emergency medical plan?
No, the hazard mitigation plan.
Oh, hazard mitigation plan.
Into the natural
All right.
mitigation plan.
The medical plan is still out?
Yes.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Hey, Phil. Thanks for that.